It's time for your mix of movers and shakers, of doers and makers. It's time for Funko Fun Chat.
Today's guest, Hocus Pocus, Chucky, and An American Tale. These are all the creations of our guest, David Kirschner.
I am David Kirschner. Really, no one knows my name, but they do know my movies that I've been lucky enough to be involved in. I started as an illustrator for Jim Henson for Muppets and Sesame Street, and then Jim called Hallmark for me with a world that I had created, and that was the beginning of everything for me. So I owe my career to him and Neil Diamond, but to both of them, because I did a lot of Neil Diamond covers as well. I always knew, I could draw pretty well, but there were people that were certainly much better than I. My hope was to be able to use that to show people what was in my head. Even from the moment that I just started illustrating, when I started to make some money from it, I knew that I was using this to get to really what I wanted to do, which was to produce, create, and write family and genre entertainment. If you were interested in what I had to say, not just as an illustrator, but in the world that I had created that I was showing someone at that point, you're also buying me as a storyteller as well. And honestly, I didn't have any kickback from that. Kathy Kennedy, she had been Steven Spielberg's partner. She brought me in to Steven on An American Tale, and she produced Raiders and everything. And now she heads up all Lucasfilm. She said to me, David, you've got to make a decision. Are you an illustrator? Are you a writer? Are you a producer? What are you? And I said, I'm those things. I use those as tools to be able to make movies and to show people what's inside. It made me a little insecure when she said that, because I thought, should I stop saying that I illustrate? But I just kind of needed to be true to, I guess, my own voice, and this is who I am. And I use my illustrations to bring people into a world that I just don't trust when I'm saying words that people will completely understand. Absolutely. When I was promoted at Sesame Street to Muppets, and I was doing just product design for Jim and Company, I started doing little storyboard sketches, little jokes, and I kind of reluctantly, insecurely showed them to Jim, but he really liked them. And they started using little bits and pieces of my storyboard quick gags with the Muppets. And that really made me feel like, okay, maybe there is something inside here that will make people interested, because that was very young in my career. I was about 19 then. Well, my biggest takeaway from Jim was that one day I want to be like that. I want to be someone that has brought smiles to so many people, but remained, he was the humblest man in the world, and just a really decent guy who, had Muppets not happened, he would have pursued it, but just as a puppeteer. And I just always loved that about him. There were no airs, there was no, I'm a star kind of person. He was just the most down-to-earth, decent man. And he, honestly, still when I talk about him, I still choke up, and it's been so long since he's passed away. He was truly one of the most decent people that I've ever met. Lucky enough to meet, I should say. I started drawing as a kid. By the time I was 7 or 8, I realized that I was better than some of the other kids in my class anyway. Again, as time went on, I would be kind of left in the dust by so many other brilliant people. But my teachers responded to it. Most of my teachers. One of my teachers, when I was in 2nd grade, when there was an assignment, and as opposed to drawing what they wanted, I did animated characters, and my teacher contacted my mom to say that my work was immature. And I've made a living from that immaturity ever since. There was an article on me in the LA Times after I had created Rose Petal, the project that Jim helped me get to Hallmark. And LA Times did an article on Shy Young Daydreamer Brings His Dreams to Life. And Kathy Kennedy read it and called me and asked to meet with me. And I didn't know what a Kathy Kennedy even was. And she said that she worked for Steven's company. I didn't know, basically she was his partner. She was pretty humble about it. And she came to my office in Beverly Hills. I showed her An American Tale, which Hallmark had passed on. I had one successful relationship with them on Rose Petal Place, but they passed on An American Tail for being too ethnic. And so I showed it to Disney, and Jeffrey Katzenberg said to me, who the F is going to go see a film about a Jewish mouse? And I said, well, who's going to go see a film about a wooden puppet? It's what you do with those characters and the arc that you take it on and the emotions. He said, nice try. So that was the end of that, and I just thought, that's it. And then Kathy called after reading this article and said, I'd like to meet with you. So she came over and I presented this new story called An American Tail to her. She didn't respond at all. I mean, she very stoic. She didn't laugh, she didn't cry, she didn't do anything. And then she just said, can I use your phone? Now remember, this is July 3rd, 1984. And I remember this date because, and I'll tell you this part in a second, but Kathy just said, can I use your phone? No cell phones back then. She called Stephen and said, you've got to see this kid's work like now. And Stephen, and I don't know what he said, but there was the Charlie Brown wah 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 on the other side. And she got off and said, Stephen would like you to come tomorrow, a half hour before, but he's inviting you to a 4th of July party at his house. I'd gone from never being invited to any kind of Hollywood party to Steven Spielberg, and over there is Sean Connery, and over there is Harrison Ford, and they were doing another Indiana Jones, so everybody was there. And Jeffrey was there also. My wife and I walked in, and I was shaking like a leaf. But I walk in and Stephen is sitting on a giant Looney Tune rug, wearing a baseball hat, as kind of 80s Spielberg always did. And all around the house, this beach house, were original cells from Snow White, from Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, and just to see this guy and what he was wearing, sitting on a Looney Tunes rug, I just felt like, oh my God, I'm at home. There's another nerd here. And I sat and I presented An American Tail to Stephen. And if you're Stephen, I'm talking to you and saying this, and Stephen gets down on the ground with me and is looking at everything. And he said, what excites me more than what I see before me is what you still have up there. And as you mature in this business, how that will come out. Let's make a movie. It has never been that easy since, and I've done about 54 projects now, and but it has never been that easy. When Stephen says it, it happens. But again, if you're Stephen and I'm talking to you, I'm barely just looking over your shoulder here, your left shoulder, and I'm seeing my wife Liz just weeping, just crying so hard, and I'm so frightened Stephen's going to turn around and see this woman hysterical on his couch. But she was just so proud of that moment and had believed in me from the very beginning of our relationship when we were 16. So it was an amazing moment that I will remember, with the birth of our kids and my wife marrying me. So yeah. Well, with Hocus Pocus, after Jeffrey passed on An American Tail, all of a sudden, and Stephen was going to make An American Tail, all of a sudden I had Spielberg pixie dust all over me. And Jeffrey called and said, we've got to do something together. And he said, what do you have? What are you doing next? And I said, well, I've been working on this story. It started really off as a bedtime story for my kids. He didn't even want to hear anything else on the phone. He said, well, just come in and pitch it to us. We want to be in business. So, they had gone from saying, who's going to see this other movie, and to now they were interested in being in business, and power of Spielberg. I went in and I asked if I could go into the conference room just a half hour before, and I had two contemporary brooms hanging from on monofilament wire. I had a Electrolux vacuum cleaner that I had someone that knows how to do these things, because I don't, take the engine out of it, and I hung that from the ceiling, and I took the cord and kind of designed it like this, as if it was flying through the air, at a giant plastic cauldron that I put dry ice in, and it you do at any Halloween party. Liz, my wife, bought about 20 pounds of candy corn, and we had the kids in the neighborhood draw ghosts and goblins and a black cat and witches on a Ralph's bag. And then I tore the bottom of the bag and I made a serpentine design of candy corn where the executives, Jeffrey and David Hoberman, were going to sit. And when they walked in, they smelled their childhood. And what I said to Jeffrey as I started off the meeting by the fact that Halloween is a $1 billion business. Today it's 10 billion, but it's a $1 billion business, and not one person has done a family film for Halloween. And I'm not even sure if he heard the rest of my pitch. I just think that made a lot of sense to him. Meeting concluded. I'm taking this dolly and going back and forth and bringing all these things back to my car. And all of a sudden I hear, David, David. And a woman who I don't know is running towards me. And she said, I'm Jeffrey's assistant. And Jeffrey doesn't want you to take it anywhere. He wants to buy Hocus Pocus. And wow, it was so exciting. But it would take almost 9 years for that to see the screen. And we went through so many writers. Finally, Bette Midler saying yes to it, and then Sarah Jessica Parker and Kathy Najimy fell into place, and the great director Kenny Ortega came in and did a phenomenal job directing it. Yeah, I mean, as far as overnight success, I don't think I've ever experienced the euphoria that must come with that feeling. It's always been a long journey to get there. I don't think I've ever had a project that's just like that, other than Spielberg saying yes to it. But before that, you know, Hallmark had passed on it and Jeffrey Katzenberg had passed on it, and you begin to doubt yourself, of course. But with Hocus Pocus, yes, it would take 9 years to get to the screen. And as I said, lots of writers, but once we made it, once it came out and Disney released a Halloween movie in July, we were out against Jurassic Park. I mean, we died. The film failed. It was, the box office was terrible. The reviews were the worst I've received in my entire career. And yet, about 7 or 8 years later, Disney threw it up on the Disney Channel. And the numbers at Halloween, and the numbers were pretty good. And so they threw it up a couple more times, and the numbers just kept building, shockingly so. And they just kept saying, well, the more we throw it on, the more the viewership grows. And it felt so good, because I'll be honest with you, that first weekend when Hocus Pocus came out, because my expectations were the moon. And when it failed, I was in tears. I was so down over it, because it started as a bedtime story for our daughters, and meant so much to me, and it represented their childhood, and now this was dead. And look, creative people, we take these things very seriously. We don't kind of roll with the punches, or I'll speak for myself, I don't. I need to mature to that level, but so far, no success. But it was just so incredible to just see it begin to build. And about 12 years later, something really was happening, and it started to grow and grow. And at the 20th anniversary, Disney decided to have a screening of the original film. On the radio, they said, you know, the first 1,000 people fans will get in free. Within under 12 minutes, sold out. So they added another show. Within 12 minutes, sold out. And I mean, they couldn't believe it. And they started to pay more attention to it. And at this point, I had been approached by a young guy by the name Blake Harris, and he said to me, David, you need to do a Hocus Pocus 2. And he was a writer, and he said, I'll work on it with you. He worked at a children's bookstore, but I read some of his stuff and I thought it was really good, and we really hit it off. And so we just started working on a story, and we went to Disney Features and presented it. It took them 6 months to respond, but they said no. Upset again. Okay, I asked my attorney if he could get the rights and we could then take it to the Disney Channel or Freeform. That worked out. We brought it to them. They bought it in the room. Great, we're going to move forward. And then Disney Plus began to happen, and they took it. And Hocus Pocus 2 became the most watched film in Disney Plus history. And it just, you know, from this failure to what that became was just, you know, pinch me moments. It's just, who would have ever thought that would happen? And from a little bedtime story, all of this has grown to your Funko Pops, and which is, just to see that is the stuff that makes me weep. Yeah, everybody's laughing back there because This is another generation that has been brought up with me terrorizing them. At the house we used to, when our kids were growing up, we used to play a game called Hide and Go Freak, and we would turn on scary music or classical music that had a feel of scary when the lights are off in the house and just fireplaces on, and I played a crazed killer, and they have to hide from me, and there was so much screaming. I have no idea what our neighbors thought, but our kids loved it, and our grandkids love it today with my Pirate Poppy stuff that I do with them. But yes, our kids grew up on a steady diet of things that go bump in the night, not R-rated horror until they were not quite old enough, but I think it's so great for kids' imaginations, and by day children imagine and pretend, and by night they have the darkest of imaginations. Of Dad, what's under the bed? Mom, close my closet door. Shadows and all of those things. And Robert Louis Stevenson, when he wrote Treasure Island, was the toast of European society. And then he turned around and wrote The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And the London Times said that he should be banned from civilized society. And then he turned around and wrote A Children's Garden of Verses. And Walt Disney understood this so well of moving an audience with things that are frightening and then make you laugh and break your heart, as in the case of Bambi or Lion King. Just that sense of loss is important, of threat, of being removed from your family, as is in the case of An American Tale, where they think their little son has washed off the ship on the way to America and he's dead. And the story is him trying to find his parents, but discovers America in the process of it. And it's a very important part of storytelling, of that loss, because there's something so intrinsic to our nature of those fears. And I think from the time we climbed out of the primal ooze and looked to the heavens and wondered what exists beyond this point, this life, that when Grog the caveman was eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, you just kind of wonder, was that the end? And it's made its way into religion, it's made its way into myth, into history. It's Joseph Campbell, the great philosopher and writer, who breaks down storytelling. George Lucas has said there wouldn't be a Star Wars without Joseph Campbell. But he speaks of this as well, of the elements of loss and fear and how it drives a character forward. I don't even know if I understood them, but they were just kind of a part of me with my own sense of loss at a young age and applying that to storytelling. What happened with Chucky was Liz, my wife, and I had been in London, and I bought a book called The Victorian Dollhouse Murders. And I had a deal at Disney at that time, and I wanted to do something with the doll that came to life. And she said to me, there actually was a script that went out about 6 months ago called Blood Buddy, but everybody passed on it. And I said, well, I'd like to read it. And she said, there's no point. You won't be able to sell it. Everybody passed on it. I said, well, I just want to know what this guy did with it. And this guy was Don Mancini, who's gone on to write all of the Chuckies and direct an awful lot of them. Very talented guy. And Don, I bought the rights to his script. I rewrote 18 pages. I didn't go out with the script that everybody had seen, changed the name to Child's Play. I did my drawings of Chucky. Again, I can't say this enough. I had that in the 80s, I had that Spielberg pixie dust on me. And I went out, and every studio that I went to, all 5 of them, wanted it. And there was a bidding war. And I decided to go with United Artists, and that's where we made the film. But Don really kind of created the world. I created Chucky and what Chucky looks like. In Don's script, there wasn't a Charles Lee Ray, and maybe for some of your fans, I don't know if they know this or not, Charles Lee Ray was a name that I had come up with because those 3 names haunted my childhood. Charles Manson, Lee Harvey Oswald, and James Earl Ray. And I put those 3 together to create this terrifying character that came to life. That's really how it all started. So Don really created the world. I created Chucky and named him, but but Don's World, and he's really been the shepherd of that, and I've produced it and created Tiffany, his wife, as well. But yeah, we've done that for 35 years. That little bastard has successfully been killing for 35 years, so we're proud to say. Yes, from the time I was a little boy, and I always say that the heralding of Halloween begins when those porch lights begin to pop on. You know, that's when it's dark and it's about to happen. And my childhood friend, on my front porch, we would build tiny little haunted, can't call it a mansion, a haunted house, not even, but it was in our porch, and kids had to walk through that to get to their candy. And I just loved terrifying these kids. I loved bringing things to life. And again, no budget, but and a lot of cheesy stuff. But back in the 60s, it worked. Everyone reacted. And I don't know, it just stayed with me, and it does the same thing. Just when you even ask me that question, I just see orange and black and purple, and I'm just so transposed to that moment. I mean, to me, summer is just like looking at my watch waiting for fall. I hate summer. To me, there should be fall into Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and then it just starts over again. I can't get enough of Halloween. And when our kids were growing up, we would have giant Halloween parties. We would rent hearses from the 60s these big Cadillacs that we'd have parked in the driveway. We have guillotines and electric chairs. We went crazy. And when we finally stopped doing it, because at 14 or 15, and the boys started throwing pizza on the roof and candy in the pool, and it was just getting out of hand, the parents were even more upset than the kids, because Halloween is just that one holiday. It's such a non-judgment holiday. I mean, Christmas, there's family drama, there's someone that's upset about something. Halloween, you could be anything you want to be. A guy can be a girl can be a guy. You could be any monster you want, any creature that's in the Funko store you could be. And you knock on someone's door that you don't even know, and a stranger opens that door and gives you candy. I mean, there's no other holiday like that. And I don't get me wrong, I love Christmas, but it pales to Halloween. Everything pales to Halloween. It's just, yes, it is without doubt my favorite holiday. So things that go bump in the night have always really appealed to me. And in that first pitch to Disney, which this part they really did not react well to, I said, think of it as your child's first horror film. And Disney, especially Disney at that point, was not interested in a horror film for children. But think about it, it's witches that are brought back from the dead, from a candle made of the fat of a hanged man, very un-Disney themes, and these witches that are brought back to life are going to suck the lives out of every child in Salem so they can stay here forever and be young and beautiful. It's the whole Grimm's feel of witches and all of that, and all the stuff that influenced me as a kid growing up and reading this stuff and watching the Legend of Sleepy Hollow on TV with Disney, and just all of those things. It stirs something in my soul. That you'd have to ask them on that part, but I've never heard them say, "There goes Dad again," but because I think they really do love it, and I think they have that baked into their soul, their DNA, from both Liz and I, because we love it so much and they grew up on that. And our daughter Jessie and her husband Jared have done the same thing in their house, and they have giant Halloween parties now, and Jared does a giant pumpkin smash where he fills a pumpkin this big with candy and gets on the second story and just throws it off, and all the kids go running for it. It's wonderful. It's life, and it's happiness. And I know our grandkids will grow up remembering what their parents did and pass that on. So no, I don't think either one of our daughters would say, "Oh, there goes Dad again." I just think they taught me with all of that stuff and love it. They're both very creative women. Honestly, in Hocus Pocus, I went full throttle, and Disney pulled back. There were things that just got too dark for them, but especially looking back on it, I do give them credit for the fact that one that they bought a story about, which is sucking the lives out of children. They really let us keep a host of dark elements. And by the way, there were parents and religious groups that had problems with that thought we were teaching the devil to children. Actually, with the new film, there was a woman that was on, that posted the evils of Hocus Pocus and do not even turn on your TV because these witches could enchant your children. And it's just like, I love that. I love that you're that crazy and you believe that, and it's just so good for the brand. Well, I was chairman of Hanna-Barbera, the animation studio, which shocked me that anybody would want me to run a company, since I'm a guy that usually sits in a room and draws pictures and writes stories and then comes out to eat something. So I really never had a real job before, and here I was asked to run an animation company. And I said, guys, I don't even know how to balance a checkbook. There's people out there that are much better than I, and they wanted somebody very creative to come in and run this company, because they also thought that the company was being prepared for a sale. Anyway, I came in, I met with Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera. Bill Hanna has remained this father figure to me and will be so for the rest of my life. I lost my dad very young, so when I met Bill, I was 33 when I went into Hanna-Barbera, and he was just so incredible to me and hand-holding to take me through stuff, because I was very honest with him about my fears of even taking this. And he had seen An American Tail and really, really enjoyed it. He had not seen Chucky, but he saw that there was a lot of success with it. And we had lunch, and I think any older man that I would ever see, I would want to please. And I guess it goes back to loss of daddy kind of things. But Bill was that guy for me. And when I got to Hanna-Barbera, I just thought, here I'm sitting behind a desk for the first time in my life. What do I do now? And I made 2 calls. The first call, I called Kathy and said, do you think that you and Steven would be interested in doing the Flintstones in live action? And she said, yes, I think we would, actually. She said, that's fun. She said, let me talk to Steven about it. And she called me later that day and said, yeah, let's develop a script. And they did. To work on that was incredibly amazing, and to see what Brian Levant, the director, brought to life was fun. We made the movie for about $54 million. It did about $350 million about 24 years ago, and it was an enormous success. I was not involved in the second, so I couldn't comment on that, but it was really fun to have John Goodman play Fred Flintstone and to have Elizabeth Taylor play Wilma's mother. It was great, and Rick Moranis and I had worked together on a show that I created called Gravedale High, so to work with him again was great. So that was very exciting. My second call was to Ray Bradbury, who I had established a relationship with in my 20s. I had written him a fan note reading his book, The Halloween Tree, which I recommend to anybody that loves Halloween. Fantastic book. And I called him and said, Ray, would you consider doing The Halloween Tree in animation? And he said, years ago, I had worked on it with Chuck Jones, and it just never happened. And then he said something that Ray would often say when he was excited, by God, let's do it. And we did it. There were times that we really clashed. I wanted to create a female character to go in there, and he said, but there aren't any female characters. I said, I know, but we need to have a female character. And he said, David, just take the book and cram it into the camera. I said, Ray, if it only worked that way. And he said, but this is what you like, and there's no female. I said, I understand, but there's an audience out there, and I'm the father of 2 daughters, and you are as well. So we need to have a female character, or we're not going to do it. I never usually played a card like that. But he acquiesced, and we created a character that added to it as well. But it's a wonderful Halloween adventure, and it won an Emmy. And it's the only Emmy that Ray has ever won in his entire career, with all of his shows that were on television. So that's something we were very, very proud of, and still plays every year. It's funny, I've never thought of it in that way. They're all things, Flintstones, Ray Bradbury, Addams Family, they're all things that I grew up on. The show in the early 60s, every week I was parked in front of the TV to watch the Addams Family. And when I was one of about 6 people that was invited to meet with a woman by the name of Lady Collyton. Lady Collyton's real name was Barbara Schwartz, and she was from Brooklyn, but she'd been married to Charles Addams. And in the divorce, she got the Addams family. I don't know how. Charles Addams has passed away by the time I met her. But when he was very much alive, she got the Addams family. And she met with me, and we just really hit it off. We just really, really hit it off. I was very fortunate. She chose me to move forward with the Addams family on, and we did a couple seasons of that show. We didn't win, but we were nominated for a couple Emmys for that as well. And I mean, it was very exciting. It was very exciting to play with Lurch and bring him into animation, and Morticia and Gomez and the kids and Fester, and just all these characters that as a 7-year-old I was watching, and here I get to work on it with Lady Collyton. So that's really how that came to be, and it worked out very well. It was very successful for us at Hanna-Barbera. I sure do. And there's from Hocus Pocus, there's a 6-foot Billy Butcherson. In there's a whole collection. It's like a Chucky museum of all the Chuckies from all the films from the first forward. Props from those films. I made a film called Frailty with Bill Paxton and Matthew McConaughey, and the axe from that film is in there. I have giant matte paintings that Sid Dutton, the late great Sid Dutton, who did so many for Star Wars. Today it's all done digitally, but that's in there. My awards, the posters. Yeah, it's a happy place for me. My whole home is a happy place for me, but that I go in there when I need a little bit of inspiration, and I kind of look around and often think, as the insecure creator often does, I will never do this again. I will never be able to make another one of those again. And maybe that's the coal that drives my insecure train. I have all these, I just love them. Yeah, I mean, for me, two things that were huge with Hocus Pocus, because originally there was no licensing at all for like 25 years, and all of a sudden now, and for there to be Funko Pops, and now they're also doing Lego is doing The Witch's House, and so to have those two pieces, it's just like I could die a happy man. I mean, that's just so incredible. When it started with just individual Funko Pops of the girls, and then you guys started selling them as a set, and then there's another one where they're gathered around the cauldron, and I mean, these are all over my office. They're so fantastic, and they're just kind of capturing each one of their personalities here, and this one with the microphone really makes me laugh, and then as I said, there's the one around the cauldron, and then there's the one where they're each, here's the one with the cauldron. It's honestly, every time I'm 10 years old, but anybody that walks into your shop, which is, by the way, like walking into Disneyland on steroids, I had no idea. I just thought I would see Funko Pops on a shelf the way that I do all across the country. I had no idea that it would be like this. I mean, this is unbelievable. But for the girls to be here, and Chucky, and even an American Tail and backpacks, it's just, it's so thrilling for me. I mean, at one point over there, I actually teared up when my wife said to me, how does this feel that Funko has made these things that you've created? And it brought tears to my eyes when she said that. And it never gets old for me. It never does. I still have that 10-year-old love and passion for all of this stuff.
Now that's a fun chat, but there's more. We have full interviews of each of these guests on our YouTube channel.